Hey y'all, Rick Houston here, and I want to tell you about my new show, the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast. I've partnered up with the state of North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to help uncover the history behind moonshining mountain boys, professional wheelmen, and the backwoods and city lights of the Tar Heel State. In the first episode, I sat down with Winston Kelly at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for a little behind-the-scenes gossip about Junior Johnson's engineering skills.
He's got two things in his hand, pipe wrench and channel lock pliers. And they weren't new. They had been around the block a time or two.
Wasn't the first steel they built, I bet.
No, I think the pliers had been red before, but paint had worn off.
And in the second episode, I talked to a professional hillbilly, a.k.a. Dr. Daniel Pierce of UNC Asheville, to find out the real history of moonshiners and their battles with the revenuers.
He wrote about one of his experience of trying to chase down this bootlegger in this souped-up car, and he complained that the government gave him these piece of crap, cheapo cars, and that were really no match, but he thought he was doing pretty good, and then the guy just hits it and just takes off and practically disappeared. But then the guy makes a bootleg turn and comes back towards him. And as he said, it was a game of chicken, and I was the chicken. And so he ran off the road. And actually, he was the guy who caught Junior Johnson at his daddy's steel when Junior got tangled up in a barbed wire fence.
So check out the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast, available on YouTube, dailydownforce.com, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And be sure to check out my regular show on NASCAR history, the Scene Vault Podcast.
Hey there, NASCAR fans. Have you got your copy of the latest edition of NASCAR Pole Position Print Magazine? If not, there's no better time than now to subscribe at polepositionmag.com. NASCAR Pole Position is the only print magazine covering NASCAR. Officially licensed by NASCAR, NASCAR Pole Position Magazine is published throughout the NASCAR season, and each edition is an instant collector's item, packed with great feature stories and photography. The magazine is even mailed to you in a poly bag for those who love to collect NASCAR memorabilia. At polepositionmag.com, you can even find past issues available to purchase. Get your subscription to NASCAR Pole Position and get great NASCAR content delivered straight to your mailbox throughout the season. Learn more at polepositionmag.com. That's polepositionmag.com. Hello, folks, and welcome into the next episode of Next Gen Creators. I'm Joshua Lepowski, your host of Next Gen Creators, the Daily Downforce podcast, where we talk to the next generation of NASCAR content creators. And before we get you deep into this podcast, be sure to head to the dailydownforce.com for some Daily Downforce content, daily NASCAR content, always on the site. And also feel free to follow us on social media at Daily Downforce on Twitter and Instagram, the Daily Downforce on Facebook. DMs are open on Twitter, so if you have any article ideas or anything to say to us, be sure to talk to us there. Today on Next Gen Creators, we have BrakeHard that is joining us today, the newest member, or one of the newest members, I should say, of the Daily Downforce family of content creators. Someone that's been a fan of a lot of different motorsports throughout his life. And so we talk about his story as a content creator and also his story about kind of how he developed as a content creator and kind of some of his philosophy and what he tries to do to make his videos unique. So without further ado, here is BrakeHard on Next Gen Creators. And now it is time to welcome in BrakeHard into Next Gen Creators. So really glad to have you here with us today. How are you doing today? And also, I believe we agree this is going to be a slight name reveal podcast. So what is your actual name? Let's ask that question as well.
Yeah, that's totally fair. My actual name is Matt. We'll keep the last name out of it for now. But yeah, everybody just refers to me as BrakeHard. You don't know how many emails I've gotten from people within the industry or just curious that are like, what's your actual name? But if you email me and I email you back, then you do see it. So yeah, it is fun when people reach out and they're like, you've been kind of anonymous.
You know what? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that by any means. And thank you so much, first of all, for joining us here on Next Gen Creators here today. You're you're a little bit newer. I wouldn't say you're newer to content creation, but your current iteration of your channel has been around for a little bit less than a year at this point. So you're kind of a new face here and NASCAR YouTube, which it's always great to see people adding themselves to this community.
Yeah, definitely newer on the YouTube side of things. I've been doing TikTok for almost 2 years now, which has been pretty successful for me. But yeah, you're right. This iteration of YouTube kind of picked up in August of last year and, has been a slow and steady climb. There's some great people that do content on YouTube, and I'm so nervous about stepping on other people's content ideas that I literally never watch anybody else's content because I don't want their ideas to influence mine. So I try to keep this path of just focusing on my stuff, which has been fun. But at the same time, I'll see Eric post something and be like, we literally have the same thought today. And then it makes me feel like whoever got it uploaded first, the other person's going to be like, oh yeah, you took this from me, but he's been super cool. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, the reality is, with us at the Daily Downforce, we're all talking about kind of the same content. So, we're all talking about a lot of the same stories, and it's all about, I think, kind of finding a way to put your own personal spin on it. Like what can you add to it that makes it sort of unique? So I think that's kind of the key sometimes. I think a lot of times when it comes to content creation.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, everybody puts out great content, and sort of just my outlook on things, I think, is what's maybe a touch different from everybody else, because I think I approach it sometimes from a marketing standpoint or just how the business side of this affects it, and not so much a reaction of oh, I don't like this that NASCAR is doing or something. It's just trying to make it consumable and kind of bring it down to a bite size for people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. And, we'll talk a bit more deeper about your creation philosophy and all that sort of stuff here in a little bit. But, I want to start out with how did you get into, well, you're more than just a NASCAR fan. Looking at your videos, you've covered all types of motorsports. You've covered Formula One, you've covered IndyCar, you've kind of covered a little bit of everything. So normally I ask people how they became a NASCAR fan. With you, I'm going to broaden this out and just ask, how did you get into motorsports in general? I see you have a McLaren. I think that's a McLaren F1 car somewhere back there. I think. Is that a Lego car?
Yeah, that's the McLaren F1 Lego. I have the OG Ferrari F1 Lego.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
6 or 5 or whatever it was. Yeah, and then I've got NASCAR diecast and other things mixed in throughout here. But back to your original question. So my motorsport journey sort of started when I was before I was even born. My dad wrenched on sprint cars around the Midwest. So my poor mother had to lug me along, being pregnant, to dirt tracks across Indiana and Ohio, and do that. So it was kind of from an early age there. Became a NASCAR fan just through that because, my dad raced around the time Gordon was coming up through sprint cars, and then just sort of followed his career. So then that became my driver when I was a kid, of course. And then that morphed into not growing up in Cincinnati, close to the Indianapolis 500, my favorite race of the year. So that has always just been a huge connection for me. And then waking up early mornings back when Formula One start times weren't 9 a.m. East Coast time. Some people forget that. They used to be 6 a.m. at times. They were brutal. Speed Vision in the early 2000s with my dad to watch those races. So yeah, just kind of come from a motorsport family and sort of just have always followed it, but never really pursued the content side of thing until the last 2 years, outside of just having a dumb Twitter account and making jokes with people.
I remember the old days of F1 when it was on really early in the morning back in the day. I remember that. I'd try to get up early whenever I could to watch some of those races. I'll admit I didn't always get up, or I wasn't always able to get out of bed early enough, but I remember some of those days. So, you're from the Midwest, which is, I'm from the Midwest as well. I'm from Indiana. So, okay. It's big motorsports area out there with IndyCar. And, if you think about it, think about the NASCAR schedule in the 2000s, you had Chicagoland, Michigan, Indianapolis, and Kentucky all around there. So the Midwest is a really big motorsports community. Even think of Ohio, you have Eldora out there in a New Weston, I believe it is. So, you kind of grew up kind of around all different kinds of motorsports. So kind of growing up, growing up sort of in more, I'd say, an IndyCar territory than NASCAR territory in some regards. Like, what was kind of your go-to motorsport growing up? And obviously with your dad being working on sprint cars.
Yeah, NASCAR was definitely the go-to for us, just because like had that connection of having raced with a couple of those guys. And of course, at the time, it was the biggest motorsport out there, former motorsport, at least, when it was just booming through the 2000s, which was, fun to be a part of and watch and everything like that. But then, of course, the Indy 500, back when Kentucky was still in operation, Kentucky Motor Speedway, that is, you had IndyCar, you had all three NASCAR series going through there, obviously later for the Cup Series. But it was fun to just be able to have one sort of central location that wasn't that far. Not that, Indy's an hour and a half, 2 hours from Cincinnati, right? So it's not that hard to get out there. But to sort of have, like you said, all those racetracks around that were hosting multiple racing series, it was easy to kind of diversify yourself. But the focus was always kind of on NASCAR, reading J-Ski as a kid, making sure that you could get in and check out all the rumors and everything like that.
Awesome. So, you mentioned how you're a big Indy 500 fan. That's your favorite race of the year. It's a big day also for me personally. I love the Indy 500 every year. Did you ever get a chance to attend to the Indy 500?
Oh yeah, we go as much as possible. Some years, obviously, schedules can't make it work, but yeah, going again this year. Once again, regardless of the controversial finish last year, still going to go sit in our seats and have a good time. But I absolutely love that event, love the day. The amount of people that are there now is astronomical, just compared to like, even if you go back 10 years or to 2010 or whatever. What we see now there is just this massive humanity, which is awesome that motorsport is just that popular now. But it's like, oh, this is now the biggest deal out there. But yeah, I love that race. I love everything about it. The whole month of May, even though it's 2 weeks, it's still one of my favorite weeks of the year.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. When I attended the Indy 500 for the first time in 2019, I was there with my dad, and we were both just amazed because we were sitting on the front stretch, and you look all the way down to the corners, and it's like the stands are filled to the brim. It's absolutely incredible, just the amount of people that are there. It creates quite the traffic jam after the race is over. But man, oh man, that's that is really awesome and really cool to kind of have that. So, you mentioned with a lot of kind of racetracks kind of around you, growing up, what types of were you going to NASCAR races at places like Kentucky and Indianapolis growing up? Did you branch out a little bit more?
Yeah, Kentucky, Indianapolis, Daytona, Martinsville as well. That's not like the worst drive in the world from where I grew up. So yeah, just sort of racetracks that were within maybe driving distance, or if you could vacation at it. That was always a great way to sort of parlay getting a race in if we could plan a vacation around it. So yeah, always trying to find some place to go. And then, now as an adult, we can kind of pick and choose where we all want to go. But yeah, growing up, it was definitely Kentucky, Indianapolis were the easiest ones to get to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, as a racing fan, you kind of started getting into content creation, like your earliest YouTube videos came out about 3 or so years ago. So that's 2020, 2021 kind of like pandemic type era. So, how much of a role did the pandemic play in you getting started in content creation?
Yeah, it played a big role because at the time, like in my professional life, we switched completely to remote, and I'm sitting in front of a computer with a microphone all day anyways, just, doing meetings and whatnot. And without any racing, just sort of trying to create content. And then when racing did come back, we can't go. So maybe the next best thing is to sort of talk about it and try to build things out there. Yeah, when I go back and look at those early YouTube videos, it was in my old house with a much worse mic setup and everything. You're like, oh, we've kind of moved a long way to at least having a decent backdrop, behind me now.
Mm-hmm. So in your professional life, do you work in digital media professionally in racing, anything like that?
My professional life has actually nothing to do with racing at all. I work in marketing. I'll probably just leave it there to be a little safe. But yeah, I work in marketing, which is sort of really fun because I can use what I do professionally also on the content side when I talk about racing. So that helps out a lot. But yeah, no, I work remote as well. So sort of being able to do content in a weird way all day between the NASCAR motorsport stuff as well as working and, being on calls and all that.
Well, that's cool. I mean, there is a big connection there between marketing and content creation, that sort of stuff. I mean, you're using a lot of marketing strategies when trying to figure out like what types of content can we make that viewers are going to click on, that viewers are going to see.
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. It definitely like plays a big factor in sort of what headlines I'll write for a video or sort of how I'll present things out there. It is my marketing brain working from time to time to try to create, what I think people will want to watch.
Absolutely. So, as we kind of get back to your content creation story, you also mentioned how you started, finding your way onto TikTok, a couple of years ago. So, and obviously that's, a newer thing. I mean, YouTube's been around for a little while longer. TikTok's kind of a new that newer kind of area. So, like, what inspired you to kind of make that? I don't know if move from YouTube to TikTok is the perfect description, but like, what inspired you to start kind of doing that?
Yeah, so TikTok, like, obviously started getting super popular during the pandemic, sort of what we talked about earlier. And I think one of the first videos I posted was when Kyle Larson put Chase Elliott into the wall at Fontana in the closing laps of that race. And I posted the video, sort of my reaction to it, and then the audio from Chase's radio. And it kind of got a lot of traction. And of course, if anybody has ever made content or TikToks or anything like that before, as soon as you get a little bit of traction and some views on it, it's like this dopamine shot where you just want to try to recreate it because it's exciting for you. And that's sort of where I started to then post NASCAR stuff. And then that sort of worked into Formula One and IndyCar and everything like that. And now I think I have a pretty good follower base and sort of know which topics will work and which ones don't. And then I always end up posting videos that are interesting to me. Even if I know they're not going to get any traction, I'm like, oh, I'm happy with this one.
Absolutely. So, like, what was your, for you when you were kind of on TikTok during that period of time, what was, were you expecting to like make anything off it, make it out of a side hustle, or was it just something that you did just out of a labor of love for the sport?
Yeah, it really just kind of came out of a labor of love. So I used to have like a written blog that I would write for all the time, just me getting my thoughts out there. And then when TikTok came along, it made it easier to put your thoughts out there just on video, of course, and make it, like I said before, these sort of consumable pieces of information for people, right? It's like a 60-second hit, might be around 90 seconds now because I get a little long-winded. But overall, it's a lot easier to put your content out there that way versus having it written out. And I still love writing. I just don't have time to do it anymore with the amount of like videos I'll put out typically. So yeah, that's sort of where, my journey into TikTok came from, was sort of transitioning from the blog over to this.
So how did the blog come about then? Like, since you started out with having a blog before TikTok came about, how did that happen?
Yeah. So when I was in college, me and my buddies had a Cincinnati sports blog, and like I just had fun writing about Cincinnati sports in college and everything like that. And outside of that, I was like, well, I literally consume all this motorsport content. I have opinions that maybe people would agree with, so I might as well try to put them in writing. And I like to, my approach to content and writing and everything is a bit different than like your Bob Pockris or your Matt Weavers, who do phenomenal work. Mine's more of like presenting the information. There's going to be a couple little one-liners in there. Whether people think they're funny or not is up to them, but I enjoy writing sort of creatively like that. And that's the approach I took to writing the blog, which then morphed into sort of how I present on TikTok and on YouTube as well.
Yeah. And I've noticed that with your YouTube videos, it's like, you do try to like put some one-liners in there, kind of like here and there, sort of like, like a little, like a little dry, like you're not super like, you don't, I'm trying to think about how best to put this, but like, you don't call attention to it, but you put them in there, just trying to see if you can get it. And that does get a chuckle out of me. They do. So like I've noticed that with you, how you kind of put those little things in there, like here and there, to just kind of like, put something kind of humorous in your video.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point to it, because at the end of the day, it's motorsport. It's supposed to be fun. Like, everything doesn't have to be so cut and dry all the time. And that's sort of my approach. But yeah, I like putting those one-liners in there. I definitely have a dry sense of humor. So there'll be times where like I'll say something and maybe look at the camera for half a second and then go on so people can maybe pick up on that. Poor Stephen Wallace catches a lot of ricochet shots from me, so I apologize for that, but it's always kind of fun to throw that in there because some people get the reference.
Do you have any, what is it about Stephen Wallace that makes him the butt of your jokes oftentimes?
But one time leaving the garage area at Talladega, he ran into a chain link fence trying to get to the racetrack. And I always just find that absolutely hilarious because I literally cannot remember another time somebody else has done that. So anytime I can drop that reference in there, and this happened like 15 years ago easily, but
I was about to say, I remember when Stephen Wallace raced. I do remember he was a bit of a meme before memes were a thing. But I don't remember the story of him running into a chain link fence at Talladega. That's wild.
Yeah, it's one of those like little NASCAR things. Everybody, of course, has their like favorite NASCAR memes from back in the day, whether it be like the Tropicana Orange or, you know, a John West Townley thing. Or Spencer Gallagher when people were calling him Spencer Galapagos or anything like that. But yes, the Stephen Wallace one just always lives rent free in my head.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So, you know, and then about, you know, as I was looking at your YouTube channel about 10 months ago or so, you were, you know, that's when you started to kind of put your content on YouTube. So, you know, what kind of went into that? And was the original idea like to just, you know, expand on some of the stuff you were doing in your other platforms, or were you actually trying to, you know, like were you trying to just, you know, make it on YouTube purely?
Yeah, no, I think it was just sort of this progression of taking my short form videos on TikTok and then moving them over to YouTube. So like if you just want the information and maybe like a joke or two or whatever on TikTok, that content's there for you. But there's definitely times where I'm talking and I'm like, I need more than 90 seconds because I don't like to go over that, even though TikTok will let you. This is supposed to be like a hit type of thing. So that's sort of how it progressed into YouTube and being like, well, you can get all my short form answers right here or my thoughts. You can also find, you know, much more thought out versions on YouTube, a little bit more information. Visuals are going to be a little bit better. Outside of putting in NASCAR video clips, because that just keeps getting hit all the time now. But outside of that, it was just this natural progression of being like, oh, we're doing these quick hits I'm doing these quick hits for people. Let's also try a long form and see how that works.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, you're also covering, as you mentioned, you're covering, you know, big stories in IndyCar, Formula One, that sort of stuff. And, you know, I mean, it's important for content creators to have a little bit of diversity in their content, you know, just so that they can reach more people.
Yeah, definitely. That's sort of where it comes from for me. As much as I love NASCAR and everything, it's always fun to talk about other forms of motorsport. Right now, Formula One content creation always sort of cracks me up because I've been watching Formula One for the better part of 25 years now, which really dates me. But you have all these content creators from Europe that will like watch your videos and then mock you because you're American or whatever. And it's like, I've been around. I'm not a Drive to Survive fan as much as people love to put them down. So it's always fun to sort of see how people interact with the different types of content you put out there, depending on which form of motorsport it is.
So you're another one of those people that watched Formula One before it was cool. So absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know,
yeah, go ahead.
But, you know, kind of to your point, like, you know, for looking at Formula One particularly, you know, there is a place for having, you know, kind of a voice in content creation for people that are, you know, for people that are from North America, because, you know, I mean, you just don't see that a whole lot out here because it's just not been a popular motorsport for very long. Yeah,
exactly. I remember the first time I went to like a local brewery and saw somebody wearing a Formula One shirt, and I was so taken aback by it because I was like, nobody around here is going to be wearing an Aston Martin Formula One shirt. And now like it's a lot more prevalent that you'll see you know, apparel and stuff from Formula One teams, which is great. Like I have no problem with the Drive to Survive fans for the most part. But yeah, it is different to see, you know, what everyone's thoughts are about Formula One now. It's the most popular form of motorsport amongst the younger demographic at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's probably the most popular form of motorsport when you look at the world as a whole. It really is. But you still your focus is still primarily on NASCAR. Throughout your content, and that's born out of it seems like just that was ultimately your first motorsport love growing up, and that's kind of where your content kind of began. So even though you do like the vast majority of your content, it's still NASCAR focused.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's always going to be focused primarily on NASCAR. I have enough people that I talk to now and enough information to sort of create all this content and sort of just keep churning it out. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'll always love NASCAR regardless of what sort of changes they make and everything. The competition is still great. The storylines are still great. And I think they're in a good position going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And looking at your channel history, the first video of yours on YouTube, particularly that really blew up, was the NASCAR at Le Mans video explained. Yep. That was the first video that really hit for you on YouTube. You mentioned how on TikTok the Chase Elliott Kyle Larson video was kind of what gave your jump start here. But go into detail about what went into that video specifically, the Le Mans video that really set you off as a content creator on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll say it also set me off on TikTok as well. I had 3 videos that did over 1 million views that week during the lead up to the 24 with the Garage 56 program. And honestly, I love that program. So when they announced it, I was happy about it. When I saw it on track, Circuit de la Sarthe, I was like, this is one of the coolest things you'll ever see because it's a NASCAR stock car with a few extra aero bits on there, but racing around, a Ferrari hypercar, GTP, whatever class you want to call it. And it just looks so ridiculous because it was so much bigger and it was so much louder and it was so much faster than all the GT cars. And I definitely, like a lot of people in America, leaned into the fact that it was blowing the doors off of the Aston Martins and the Ferraris down the straightaway with a big pushrod V8. I definitely had some very pro-American things that I said in the videos, which was fun just to see people's reactions to it. But yeah, that whole program, because I think I've said this before on TikTok and whatnot, that whole program, the Garage 56 program, it brought all NASCAR fans together in a weird sense. Like even outside of NASCAR fans, it just sort of brought all American motorsport fans together that were like, got behind this car. It was like the Olympics. Oh, this is our country. We're all going to support this. Completely ignoring the fact that Corvette and Cadillac were out there as well. Everybody got behind that, and sort of me just being happy about that program just turned into great content.
Yeah, and I think I think Eric in his videos put it really well. I mean, that particular project was unapologetically American. Like it was unapologetically like American motorsport, that sort of stuff. And I mean, it's kind of set off the potential for NASCAR to go international, in the future and that sort of stuff. Do you, out of curiosity, do you have like if you want to look at NASCAR in the future, looking at internationally, Garage 56, stuff like that, where would you like to see NASCAR go?
NASCAR keeps mentioning Brazil, and obviously they have the NASCAR Brazil series, but I would absolutely love to see a Cup Series race at Interlagos and Sao Paulo, where Formula One races at for the Brazilian Grand Prix. I think that would be an absolutely incredible race to have there. Outside of that, the Red Bull Ring in Austria, I think, is another great track that would fit the Gen 7 Cup car and put on a pretty good show. One of the most popular answers I always see are people that want to see it go to Monza or go to Spa, which are both great classic European circuits. Spa is just a really long lap. And every time people talk about having a Formula or a NASCAR race there, I'm like, you guys realize a full course caution here is going to take forever. Like, Road America's long. This is going to be longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, as as NASCAR kind of evolves and that sort of stuff into, international potentially and stuff like that, that means that you as a content creator have to evolve as time goes on. So, kind of for you, where have you kind of seen yourself kind of evolve over this brief period while also thinking about where you're trying to evolve in the future?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has evolved into me having more like thought out points and videos when I'm making them. It's not so much like an instant reaction where you come off like a little brash and whatnot. It's sort of just, I don't really make immediate reaction videos for the most part anymore. I kind of wait to consume the post race and sort of see what the general vibe of it is and maybe go back and watch a few key moments, where before I might just put out a video that's immediately like, bam, in your face which is fine. There's great content that comes out of that. But I like to sort of sit back now, consume it, and then put out, some more well thought out ideas versus making some brash decisions and saying something that might come across as stupid or get me out of line with some of the people in the industry.
Yeah, well, I've noticed that as time is, when I'm looking at your videos, you do take a little while to kind of put videos out there from certain topics. You do give yourself time to kind of think about it, digest it, that sort of stuff. And I feel like there is, a sense of responsibility, I think, for people that are content creators to kind of while fans tend to give the instant reaction and tend to be very brash and all this, this is good, this is bad, this is whatever, give the ultimate visceral reaction of whatever, it's really up to people like you to be able to sit back and say, okay, well, let's break this down here from all sides. Okay, here's what this aspect means. Here's what that aspect means. Okay, and then come from there and then say things like, okay, here's what this actually means. And, also injecting a little bit of your own opinion in there. Nothing inherently wrong with that either.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Perfect example of that is this past weekend at the Clash. So I was headed to Los Angeles from a ski trip. I'm in the airport. I get the notification that NASCAR is moving the Clash up to Saturday night. Guess what? That completely ruins my entire travel plans to get to Los Angeles because I was supposed to get there Saturday night. Was I mad about it? No, not really, because I can go ahead and switch those flights. I can cancel the rental car. Not the biggest deal in the world to me. I completely understood why they did it. And I think there's a lot of people that immediately took to social and were like, this is the dumbest thing ever. People paid to go to this, blah, blah, blah. I get it. I get being upset about it. But when you sat back and thought about it for 30 seconds, I was like, yeah, no, this makes all the sense in the world. I'll watch it at the airport, fly back home, totally fine. But yeah, I think that's one of those moments where maybe even a year ago, I would have been a lot quicker to judge, but it's sit back and think about everything that goes into this. Yeah, it's understandable.
Well, it's a very complicated thing. And I think, a lot of times, it's very easy sometimes to kind of look at this purely from a fan watching perspective and think about what you want. But then you have to remember that NASCAR, the teams, all that sort of stuff, they have multiple things that they have to think about. They have to think about, okay, how does this affect our TV partners? How does this affect the teams? How does this affect the fans? How does this affect all of these people? And offering that education and giving people the understanding, whether they like it or not. It's just because it exists doesn't mean people have to like it, but right. Giving them some perspective of this is the reality of the situation, whether you like it or not. And, but at the same time, trying to balance that with offering, opinion on it, because, in a lot of instances, there is a majority opinion that does emerge. And sometimes it's okay to be a little bit critical and to say, yeah, this was a bad idea, or to be complimentary and say this was a good idea.
Oh, yeah, 100%. There's definitely times where NASCAR will make a decision where I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do. This situation, completely understand. They absolutely ate it at the Clash, refunding all the tickets. They don't get any merch sales out of this, barely. Concession sales are down. Everything about it is bad. Took a ratings hit. So I understand that. And I know there's fans that were definitely mad about it. I get that. But then when you sit back and look at other decisions that they made, that was a good one. And then you'll sit back and look at when they sent them off into Daytona when it was raining into turn one, we junked a bunch of race cars. Bad decision. And they openly will admit that was a bad decision. So it's stuff like that where, you just have to balance it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of for you, you've alluded to a couple of times how, you've people will make comments and stuff like that about your videos and that sort of stuff. And, you seem to kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say, you relish too much in some of those, but, you're okay with hearing a little bit of negative feedback here and there. Oh, yeah. You're okay with those sorts of things. Why to you is that so important?
Yeah, I love the feedback that I get in the comments. I know one of the biggest things, I tell people, is never read your comments, especially if you take things pretty personally, because comments can be pretty brutal. For me on TikTok, I love interacting with the comments because generally they can be kind of funny at times. And I also I have a pretty witty sense of humor or dry sense of humor. So I like to clap back at times and have fun with that. On YouTube, I definitely think there's a lot more thought out comments on YouTube, which I appreciate, where they'll come with more information or be like, hey, I think that, this is why this happened or something. And I can always appreciate that because for the most part, I'm looking at it from my viewpoint. When I make these videos, I don't have somebody here like a co-host or whatever that I'm bouncing ideas off of. So when I see what they're presenting, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes total sense. Or like people will give me feedback about like, hey, maybe avoid like making jokes about this in the future. Okay, I'll take that into consideration and stuff like that. Or maybe make a video on this. I always appreciate the feedback that people give, whether they like the videos or not. It's always fun to just hear from them.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me, and let's make this a little humorous here. Can you tell me the worst piece of advice you've gotten from a commenter on YouTube or TikTok?
There was a guy yesterday that literally told me to return the microphone, pack it up, and stop making content, which was his right. He can say whatever he wants. And I was like, all right, I appreciate the feedback. I don't think I'm going to do that, but that's fair enough. Other than that, yeah, there's some times where people will submit comments to me or like ideas where I'm like, I don't think that's going to work. Oh, you should really cover NASCAR fantasy. You'll get a lot of followers out of that. No offense to people who play NASCAR fantasy, but it's not exactly that's not going to make me go over the 100,000 follower mark or anything like that. So I have to pick and choose sort of which considerations I take.
Well, you do. And, it is important to hear kind of what they have to say. They do have to, it is important, at the same time, and you have to kind of nuance that sort of with a lot of things. And that's something that you have to consider. You have to think about kind of as time goes on. So, for you, as you're thinking about where kind of your channel is right now and that sort of stuff, are you thinking about how you can take it to the next level? Like, are you thinking about like, maybe trying to do content at races in the future at some point? Are you thinking about trying to, maybe, be more of a media entity at some point in the future? Or are you okay with kind of staying where you're at for right now, given the fact that you have a normal job in marketing and, you don't, it's not like you're relying on YouTube to survive.
Yeah. So that's actually a good question because when I do meet people at racetracks, they're always like shocked that I have a full-time like professional job, which it makes me happy that they think I could live off of the money I make from creating content. Just that's absolutely not true. But for me right now, I sort of like the lane that I'm in. I'd love to see the channel grow a little bit more. I'll be going to more races this year. We're headed down to Daytona next weekend for the 500. And then I have some more throughout the year that are already scheduled. But yeah, behind the scenes, working with a few different people to sort of, help grow this channel and position it in a better spot than what we're currently in right here. And then with TikTok, like that's going to just continue to keep growing sort of at the pace that it is. It's growing at a pretty good rate right now. And especially with the season coming up. So I think at the end of last season, when I was doing YouTube content, I wasn't really like honed in on sort of what my schedule would be with putting out content. Now heading into this season, I have a good idea on sort of what I'm going to be doing Sunday night and then throughout the week as well to help, have a more regular posting schedule. So I'm excited about that to sort of see how that helps improve just even the quality of the channel. And I made a couple other little improvements just with my setup and everything like that to make it look just a little bit better. So yeah, I think to answer your question in a less long-winded way is to help grow it. But my focus isn't going to be on that full time unless, barring it taking off like crazy. But I sort of like how it's growing right now.
What are your newest additions to your set? You mentioned you made set improvements, and since we have a beautiful view of your background right here, what are the little improvements that you've made?
Yeah, so I bought this house almost 2 years ago at this point, and it took me forever. This is my office where I work literally every day. My actual desk is behind our computer where you can see me. But I set up I built these built-ins behind me here. So we got a lot of random little racing things on it. I think there's a NASCAR Lego there, the Formula One Lego. And then on this side, we've got Gordon and some other little cars. These lovely Mercedes F1 cars that Costco was selling. Shout out to American Costco for that. And there's like some random Kimi Räikkönen things on here because that was my favorite F1 driver when I was a kid. But yeah.
I see you got some bobbleheads up there. Are those look like Cincinnati Reds bobbleheads up there? Are those what those are primarily?
Yes, yeah, you're 100% correct. Got a lot of Reds bobbleheads up there. There's some more in the closet as well.
Yeah. By the way, I've got to say, I've been to your. I grew up a Cubs fan. I've been to your ballpark. You got a nice ballpark out there, and I've seen the Reds because they're in the same division as the Cubs. I've seen the Reds way too many times all throughout my life. So
that's how I feel about the Cubs. It's basically, the whole entire third baseline of the of Great American turns into Wrigley South when the Cubs get here. But yeah, I know Wrigley's a fantastic ballpark. Great American's a great ballpark as well. So yeah, that's cool that you're a Cubs fan though.
Yes, absolutely. Funny enough, I actually saw the Cubs play the Reds last August, I think it was, if I remember right. I think I went with my dad and my wife, then fiance, and my mom. We all went together to see him play sometime last August. But back looking towards NASCAR, you're actually one of the newest members of the Daily Downforce network of content creators. Yeah. So I remember I was first introduced to you specifically through the truck series Fox video that you made, which was one of those videos where you were quite critical, and that's something that people generally tend to be very critical of the truck series broadcasts on Fox. So that's how I was first introduced to you. Where did this whole thing with getting involved with the Daily Downforce come about?
Yeah, so that truck video definitely had multiple people reach out to me through like my email account, which was interesting. All good feedback, but the people I talked to, I was surprised by that. The Daily Downforce sort of came out of Craig just reaching out and being like, we've had multiple people, from Daily Downforce that watch your content or like, we should reach out to you. And it was just him basically sending me a cold email to be like, hey, are you interested in doing anything? And of course, I was aware of Daily Downforce. I'm aware of, all the content creators that were on it. And I was like, yeah, let's sit down and talk about it. And that's sort of where it's come from, is just from that and a couple of the videos that I put out that, got some traction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So like, what for you, how does being a Daily Downforce content creator, like, how does that help you personally, in your kind of content creator journey? Like what are the ways that it helps benefit you?
Yeah, we're still in the infancy of it. So it's sort of like this whole new process for me, but just having like a dedicated page on the Daily Downforce with like, a profile page for BrakeHard with the videos posted there, and then a short write-up about them as well is always great, because it allows me to be able to like retweet that on Twitter, and people can look through that, that bit of a recap in a sense, and then get an idea for what the video is going to be about, and, go from there. But also just having, access to all the other creators as well. So hopefully throughout this year, we can collab on a few different things and do a couple meetups at racetracks and whatnot. But just, seeing what other people are doing is always nice. Like I said at the beginning, I try not to watch content because I don't want it to influence my opinions on things, but it is nice to see what everybody else is thinking in a sense. And hopefully we can all get together and work on things.
That is an interesting, you kind of explained it earlier, but that is an interesting philosophy of, like trying to, staying away from other people's content, because you're trying, you explained it earlier, you're trying to make sure that, what you're making is your own, and you're not, you're not too influenced by other opinions. You want to try to be as unbiased as you can in that sense. You're just trying to make sure that you make your content as original as possible. So, in light of a lot of that, who are some of the content creators? Like, have you connected with any of them yet? And, are you expecting to connect with any of them at Daytona? I know Eric's going to be there. Specifically, he announced he was going to be recording a Power Hour with Brendan Poole live there. So I know Eric's going to be there. But can you just kind of tell me, who are the content creators you've connected with, expect to connect with as time goes on?
Yeah, it's an easy answer. None so far, which is kind of all right with me. We just started doing this Daily Downforce thing probably like 4 weeks ago at this point. And then I just found out I was going to Daytona earlier in this week because of those class travel plans I mentioned before. We just pivoted, and now we're going to go to Daytona, which is fine. So we'll see. I don't know if I will do anything at Daytona in terms of like Daily Downforce stuff, but always open to that. And then hopefully throughout the year, we can get together and connect. I think on the BrakeHard side, I'll be doing a podcast probably after each race. for at least a little bit. And I have a couple people that I think will probably hop on from time to time and rotate in and out as like a co-host. So it's not just me sitting here, Bill Burr, Monday morning podcast style, just talking for an hour. Because I think it's good to have somebody else there to bounce ideas off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen, I've seen that you kind of like started, that you had a podcast for a little while there. So, now that you're starting new, this is again, another expansion kind of your content. So like, what's your new podcast? What's that going to be all about?
Yeah. So I think like what I had done before was maybe just like a general breakdown of everything that happened on the weekend in terms of motorsport. And it'll still be that in a sense, but I'm looking to probably bring, one or two people in to sort of rotate through that like co-host chair. That way, it'll be a little bit more fun. It won't just be my opinion and my voice the whole time, because I don't want to hear myself talk for an hour straight. And I know people probably don't want to hear that as well. So it's always good to have, somebody else there. But I think it'll be just a better iteration of what it was before. And now I sort of have a more focused approach to it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that's really awesome and really great to hear. So, as you kind of, head through the 2024 season, and as you're growing your channel and all those sorts of things, you've already talked about it a lot here. There's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited for 2024. Like you said, being a part of Daily Downforce is great. Having a better idea in terms of like content schedule now going forward is really good. Have a few races lined up throughout the year. Probably will end up adding more or going to other ones as well. So yeah, trying to keep a bit of a diverse schedule travel wise for races. That way we can kind of cover a bit of everything, but also making it to the big ones when it matters, because it's always fun to be there. Yeah,
absolutely. So, we have this is going to be likely released after the Daytona 500. So there's a chance that you're going to have an old takes exposed moment here. But, I do want to ask you before you go, just kind of tell me, as we're so close to the start of the season, tell me, what are your kind of overall expectations for 2024? What do you want to see? What are the things that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I think, what I go into every season for is hoping for like a high level of parity, because it makes the series more interesting. What I want to see is Brad Keselowski get back to victory lane. I want to see Stewart-Haas Racing turn it around a bit, because as much as people love to clown on them, the sport is better when we have more competitive cars, and that's a strong team. So I'd like to see them come back up. I'm really interested to see how the start of the season goes with Daytona right into Atlanta. That's a big one, as well as Atlanta being in the playoffs now. Slightly concerned with the number of drafting tracks that will be with that. So yeah, there's a couple schedule things I'm interested in. Really excited for Iowa. I think that Iowa has the potential to put on a really good cup race with the surface that it has there. So I'm pretty excited for that one, regardless of the comparisons it gets to Richmond. It should be pretty good. And the Chicago street course. I know it's not the most popular thing amongst some parts of the fan base, but to have that race potentially actually happen when Chicago's nice out would be a huge added bonus, just to see what happens.
Well, and as someone who grew up in the Chicago area, for me personally, that's a race that I just, I hope every year that thing is successful, because that's a race that is important to me personally. So, obviously that's very important. So, thank you so much. I forgot your name already, Matt. Thank you so very much, Matt. BrakeHard as well for joining us here today on Next Gen Creators. So, thank you so much once again for joining us. We can't wait to see how you do with the Daily Downforce. So, some final thoughts here before we sign off here today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to work with Daily Downforce, get this season started, get down to Daytona and see what happens down there, because like always, it's unpredictable. I think I said on a video last week that I picked Brad Keselowski to win. He was going off at 11-1. So I'm going to stick with that one.
This is likely coming out after Daytona. So you know what, if he wins,
the cold takes exposed. Yes.
If he wins, then you know what, then you're a NASCAR prophet. If he doesn't, then old takes exposed 100%. We'll see if that absolutely happens. Thank you so very much, Matt, here for joining us today. Once again, that was BrakeHard on Next Gen Creators. great interview with BrakeHard on Next Gen Creators. We want to thank him once again for joining us here today. It was really great to hear about his content creation story and just kind of how he tries to make his content unique. He tries to be, you know, as measured as he can be, tries to be a little witty here and there, and also tries to make sure that he's not letting outside opinions influence how he feels about certain topics within NASCAR that he talks about in his videos. They are all very interesting to talk about, and it was all very cool to hear him talk about everything. Once again, be sure to follow the Daily Downforce on Twitter and Instagram at the Daily Downforce, the Daily Downforce on Facebook as well. Be sure to email us, shoot us a DM on Twitter as well if you want to, have any ideas or have any guest suggestions for Next Gen Creators. And also, feel free to head to the dailydownforce.com for daily NASCAR content and to listen to all other episodes of Next Gen Creators. Thank you so much for tuning in here, folks. Have a great day.